Good.
All right. Okay, there's Anne. We've got enough to, we've got a quorum, so why don't we go ahead and call to order? So this is the April 7th meeting of the Southborough ARPA Committee. It is 7:32. We can do a quick attendance. Ms. Luttrell is not on yet. Mr. Wood?
Here.
Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Martell?
Hi.
Mr. Schoner?
Hi.
Ms. Rubenstein?
Here.
And I am here. Oh, and Mimi just joined. Mimi, are you here?
Here.
Perfect. All right. Everyone's in attendance. All right. So I am going to very quickly share my screen with the agenda. Let me know when you can see it. I've got 35,000 things open right now. There it is. Okay. Let me know when I'm sharing.
I don't know. John's doing a barrel roll. He made me dizzy.
Oh man. Okay, so very quickly we'll take a look at the fund request log. I have two updates to it. They'll take like 2 minutes to go over. We're going to review the preliminary results from our survey, and we should actually have two volunteers from the MTC team who've actually already been able to go through and put together some initial findings from it for us. So they should be in the audience and can help us take a first look, which is awesome. We'll go in and talk about the proposals. There were a bunch of questions that came out from last week. I know folks have been sending in some replies they got. I've been trying to forward them out, but we'll go through and get updates on those. And then identify if there are any remaining questions that we want to address. Again, we talk about our evaluation approach. This is a standing item here. Next steps. We're backlogged on a number of minutes. Tony, I know you said yours won't be available till next week. John, I think yours are next week also. So we have the 24th and the 31st to vote. Or this is, yeah, no, the 24th and the 31st to vote on today.
I realized today I was going way into detail on my minutes. I realized I was going way into too much detail.
High level, John, high level. The videos are up.
I had 4 pages of it written, and it was only like halfway through one of the things. So I'm going to condense it a bit, and I apologize.
Fair enough.
It's hard doing minutes.
That's an interesting point, John. The selectmen actually were just talking about the fact that boards are doing too good of a job on minutes, and that the real intention behind them is to capture attendees and motions and a high level summary of what's been discussed. And a lot of boards and committees are really doing like yeoman's work on minutes, and it's probably overboard.
And probably doesn't serve the intention of someone being able to get a quick glance, right? If you want all the information,
yeah,
the videos are there.
Yeah, especially that there are YouTube recordings now. So I do think that as a board, we should consider following the select board's advice and severely cutting back what we do.
Then you will have my minutes tomorrow.
Yeah,
John,
it's hard
to make
to
you
say
feel
that
better,
because
Better Capital had an intervention with me with my minutes a couple of times. So you're ahead of the intervention.
I was on too many committees with Sam Stivers and Brian Shea, and they were pretty good examples of how to do minutes. I apologize.
Right.
I didn't mean to digress from
No, that's okay. So we'll have 2 rounds for next week and 2 that we'll approve this week. We'll touch on any unfinished business and then open as always for public comment to make sure we're clear on our next meeting. All right. So with that, I'm going to quickly jump over to the request logs that I've got 2 updates that came in. Let me pop over. Okay, let me know when you can see. Am I sharing? Okay. So one, and this should have gone out in an email. So originally the Trails Committee had submitted 2 separate feasibility studies. They've now consolidated that request into one. So now they only have 3 requests with us. And so it's for the shared use path, the Boston Worcester Airline, or sorry, the shared use paths and the Boston Worcester Airline are now combined into one feasibility study, and both are now under the $75,000 umbrella. Which Joe, I know you had reached out to them. Am I reading that right? That we went from 2 $75,000 studies to just one?
Yes.
Okay.
And I had a long conversation with Catherine. She was great. I really have to give her props for everything she threw at me. In terms of that, when we talked about that proposal, I alluded to the fact that that the multi-use was part of the other trail, but the other trail system that she was asking for feasibility study for. The other thing is that she realizes that trolley line, especially over near my neighborhood, has houses actually on that line. And so doing a feasibility study for that line is really about doing a feasibility study for the parts that are available, not to try and run it through neighborhoods where, you know, people, they built Leeds Way right below on the other side of the hill, right on top of it, a neighborhood. So she understands that particular. So the study that she's really proposing includes parts that are undeveloped of that, but really centering more around the multi-use part as a first part of that feasibility.
Okay.
And then whatever's left over can be used to study the alternate parts that haven't been developed.
Okay. And we'll get into like the real detail. So that's good. It sounds like it was a really comprehensive discussion. So just it drops one of our overall requests out of the list for now.
Yes.
And then I had one additional request that came in from Shopsy. It's for $8,500 for consultant support for next year, for technical assistance to the committee for ongoing activities. I sent out, there's an email that came in that I sent around that had some more detail in that, looking for sort of a consultant to help with like looking for grants and things like that. I'm not, I see 2 hands that went up. Mimi?
Is that for Sarah to continue on after 6:30? So that's for staff.
Is that what this is? I'm not, yeah, if there's more detail to that, that's not something I'm aware of. So we think this is for a staff person who we can, John, you've got your hand up too.
Yes, it is. That is for Sarah to continue on a bit longer. She used to be the assistant planner. Oops, sorry, my dogs are barking. She was the assistant planner, and she's been working as a consultant for us and helping us out with some with a lot of different projects that we've been working on. We had our meeting yesterday. Can I answer while we're talking about Shopsy, and that's it right above there? Can I just give you my answers on the questions from them? Or do you want to hold off on that?
Let's hold, because I've got folks to talk about the survey and I want to make sure we get to them. I really just wanted to do like this is what's changed in terms of the proposals that are here. Shopsy will be
sending another request though.
Okay. So let's stop this one here. Those are the updates, the overall proposals that we have in hand. Let's take it over to the survey and go, and I'll pull over, hang on, and then we'll come back and we'll do the real detailed walkthrough on the proposals. So I should have Brian and Marianne in the audience. All right, so Brian Veas, I'm going to allow to talk.
You've also got Matt there too, Matt Probst.
Okay.
Hi, this is Brian.
Hey, Brian. So I know I've got another Marianne in the audience. Is that
She's actually not going to be able to join tonight. She has a little bit of a cold, so it's just me.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna pull Matt over to Matt. I know this is mostly Brian walking us through, but I'm giving you permission also.
Good, thanks.
Okay. So with that, again, just a huge thank you from our committee. Right, so Matt obviously has been instrumental in getting the survey up and out and through, and Brian is a volunteer data scientist, or not a volunteer data scientist, he is a data scientist who has volunteered his time with the overall survey results and has been really cracked the whip on getting ours done early so that we'd be able to have a first look today. So thank you very much for all your work on this. And with that, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you and stop talking.
Okay, no problem. I'm sorry if you're waiting on me, but will I get like screen sharing permissions? I'll just have some.
Do I
slides
need
want
to give
show.
you different permission? Okay, hold on. Let me see what I can do. Okay.
Promote him to a panelist.
Yeah, I think right now it says that only the host can share. So I'm saying all panelists can share. And okay, so I'm going to move him over as a promote to panelist.
Okay, I just got a pop up for that.
Yeah. Okay. So you should have a share screen option at the bottom now. Great, we can see it.
You're on mute, Brian.
Sorry, was I on mute that whole time?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. Okay. Matt, did you want to give a little bit of an introduction on any of this on the survey, or do you want me to just take it away?
Yeah, go ahead and take it away. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a volunteer. I'm currently working as a data engineer for a small healthcare company, but I'm working with Matt through the MTC to help analyze some of this survey data that we got for this ARPA Southborough survey. So this was done by myself and my wife. And just a quick little background here. Hide this window. So this is my wife and I. We moved to Southborough in 2018. You know, we like to spend a lot of time traveling and hiking here in Southborough on the local trails, spending time with our friends and family. And as far as expertise, she works more in healthcare. I'm kind of new to the healthcare field, but I've had experience with more traditional engineering, materials research, and manufacturing. Yeah, so that's how we got asked for this. And I'll get right into it. So as far as the survey, we had 674 participants. There were 17 different candidate choices that voters were allowed to basically rank. And I did the analysis in Python, and I can make that code available if anyone wants to have access to that or just keep it for your records. But looking at the data, we had a pretty good participation. Granted, the survey was really just the one or two questions, but you know, about 31% of people left no blanks. So the way it worked is if you ranked all 17 answer choices, that was counted as no blanks. If you rated 16 and didn't rate one, that was one blank, and so on and so forth. So there were some people who got into the survey and then chose to not rank anything, and that was about 15% of the participants. But for the most part, we had really good survey response rates. So just to give a quick background before I show you the final outcome, I wanted to just go over the voting analysis methods that I used. So first, what I did was just a simple majority rules. It's probably the most familiar voting algorithm that you're accustomed to, but it's basically just a count of your top choice, and then you know, whoever had the most number one votes would be chosen as the winner, assuming there was no tie. And then because we were allowing voters to basically rank their voting by preference, we were also able to do what's called a ranked choice voting. And if you're not familiar with this method, it's actually pretty interesting, and quite a few like states and more local governments are starting to use this kind of ranked choice voting as well, because the benefit is that it really gives voters more choice, and it reduces the number of wasted votes or votes that get thrown away. So for example, the way it works basically is, you know, you have voters rank all your potential candidates, and then if a candidate gets over a majority of 50%, then that's it, they win. But if that doesn't happen, then a runoff is declared. And in the runoff, what happens is the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated, and then any voter who chose that eliminated candidate as their first choice, their second choice preference would now come into play and be counted for that second choice candidate. So it really allows people who maybe vote for, like in this picture here, candidate D is their primary choice. It would allow them to, even though this candidate is going to get eliminated, maybe their candidate C was their next choice, and that vote would then flip up to that person and be counted. So it's a pretty interesting algorithm. But so getting into the data, if we look back again at the majority rules.
Hey, can we,
So again, this
just
is just a count.
pause for 1 second? Andrew, did you see that pop up?
I did, and I think that we are.
Streaming?
I think we're correct. We should not be streaming. We should be doing a recording. We had a live stream for the for the forum we did a couple weeks ago, but typically we don't live stream. We just record.
Okay.
Oh,
Just
Tim,
wanna
I
make
see you
sure saw
responded.
that.
Tim, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure you saw it.
Nope, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, is there anything I need to do to disable streaming here, or you guys are all set?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So looking at the majority rules, the just count of primary answer choices. So this is just taking the top choice each voter picked. The number one choice was property tax relief, with 169 voters choosing that as their number one choice. Interestingly, we had a tie between the senior center and the sidewalk work. So funding sidewalk work repairs and senior center expansion both had 87 votes. So again, by majority rules, coming in at a tie for second place. And then just going down the line here, you could take a look at all these. I'll share these slides out as well, but I thought I'd just show you the top 5 out of this list here. And the purchase of the 1.7 acre lot was third, followed by youth and family services, and then town bonus pay. Okay, so moving on to ranked
Brian?
choice. Yes,
So
go
just
ahead.
one. So we did confound ourselves a little bit by adding. We made a change to the language on the youth and family services and the Lundblad field, and added the trails later. So we had 3 things that had adjustments about after like 165 people had responded. Is that something that you looked at in this?
Yeah, Matt did alert me to that. So as far as the naming changes, that definitely was not an issue, because the final data basically just had the final names with the original votes combined with the votes to the new name. So it didn't cause any issues. As far as the, I forget which one it was, but you mentioned one
It's
was
the
actually added
trails.
mid-survey,
Yeah.
the trails. Yeah, that, I mean, the only downside to that really is that a certain amount of voters didn't get the opportunity to choose that as they completed the survey before that was added. I didn't look too deeply into how many, let's say, I'm not exactly sure where in the survey that was added. So I don't know if it was like 10 voters who missed it, or if it's 100 voters who missed it. But, you know, if that's something you're interested in, I could go back and take a look at, you know, how many people just didn't have an opportunity to vote on that.
Yeah, I don't know how hard this is to just like run through whatever the algorithm you have is, but I could give you the date if it's easy to just like do the cutoff and see like what the difference is before and
definitely,
after.
If I have a pen here, the cutoff would be the easiest way to do it. Let me just grab a pen. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if you wanted to like put in the chat or something what the actual day and
Yep.
possibly even time when that was added.
Yeah, I can look it up.
Okay.
I'll take me a second here because I'm going to pull it up. If you want to keep going, I'll just put it in the chat once I grab
Yeah,
it.
that'd be great.
Okay.
All right, so looking at the ranked choice, this is especially great because it helps break ties like we had in the just majority rules. So the way this works is you have rounds. So at each round, the lowest ranked candidate is eliminated. So there were 12 rounds before we got to say the top 5. So we're here looking at round 13, where property tax is still in the lead with 195 votes. Senior Center took a bit of a lead over the fund sidewalk work. And the reason that is basically is that those people who voted for things that got eliminated, they chose Senior Center as a higher rank for say like preference 3 or 4 versus sidewalk, which maybe they chose for something lower, like 9 or 10. And then again, the 1.7 acre lot shows up, and then the town bonus pay shows up. So really not all too different than the top 5 with the majority rules count. So if we go down to a couple rounds more into round 15 to the ranked choice of top 3, again, it's still property tax, senior center, and sidewalk in the top. And then just I took it one step further to the final count between the last 2, and it's property tax at 304 votes and senior center at 234 votes. That is pretty much it. So I did add a couple of appendix slides here in the end, which I won't really go through in too much detail, but I can share the slides. But basically has some numbers like the the count of, I guess we can take a look, but count of votes per candidate, count of blank responses per candidate. So, interestingly enough, well, this might help actually answer your question about the town trail system. So this is the number of blank votes per candidate. And actually, you can see here that we had a little bit of a spike on the town trail system. So definitely having added that mid-survey would be a good explanation there.
It's higher than the others.
Yeah, so it's around
Just
like
looking.
340 blanks versus, say, the next highest was signed to the Mark Southborough Center at a little bit over 300, maybe like 315. So
Yeah, and I think it
not
was
too far behind, but definitely something noticeable.
Hey, Brian,
Yes.
this is incredibly helpful, by the way, but just one question. So help us think from a statistical point of view about the number 674. Like how should we think about that? Is that a good response rate or an insufficient response rate? What do you think?
That is a good question. I mean, I think it's certainly enough to get a sense of what preferences from a decent amount of people. But as far as, say, a percentage of like the population of town residents, which I don't know off the top of my head, might not be hugely significant. So I haven't had a chance to dig into the actual Southborough satisfaction survey, but it might be helpful to compare to that to see what the turnout of that one versus, say, this ARPA survey was, and get a sense of, did we get more people who filled this one out or a much lower turnout, and kind of compare and contrast those two.
Yeah,
Point of comparison.
I can definitely address that. The satisfaction survey definitely got a lot fewer. I say a lot, it's more like, I think we got something like 450 or so, because obviously the ARPA survey was our first and foremost premier on our promotion, and it's a much simpler survey than the satisfaction survey. So sorry about that. Go ahead, Tim.
There's no problem. I was just going to add, generally speaking, in our town elections, it's not uncommon for candidates to receive under 1,000 votes. So 674 is pretty good. And it's certainly more than some of the surveys we've had in the past.
That's a really helpful data point. The voting population, or the typical vote, Tim. That's very helpful. Thank you.
But that's contrasted against our town resident. We have about 10,000 people in town, right? So, and I know that's not all voting members, but that's pretty, it's pretty light turnout if you assume like maybe half
Yeah,
are voting, right?
Yeah, that's right. We generally assume maybe 300 to 400, I think, at town meeting. And if we're lucky, we get, candidates get 1,000 votes at the polls. So,
Okay, yeah, you're looking at like 7 to like 13%, somewhere in that ballpark. So yeah, I'm not sure what's typical for like a town election outside of our town, or these kinds of things. So difficult for me to say.
And I
will
see your hand
say,
up. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
670, it's more respondents than I expected personally. I didn't really know what would happen, but I didn't think it would be that big, I guess. So I don't know what you guys all were expecting, but that seems like a very respectable response rate. And so then actually meaningful guidance perhaps for us.
Anne, I see your hand up.
My question was, how does that compare with the results of last year's survey, the satisfaction survey? How many participants were there? And maybe Matt could answer that.
Yep. It was definitely more this year. We had I think 430, and last year, I'll give you the exact numbers. So sorry, citizen survey this year was 510. I was wrong about 430. It's 510 responses. We got 674 of the ARPA funds, and last year for the citizen survey we got 423. So last year's citizen survey went from 423 to this year 510. And I think that's wonderful. Last year, though, we were on a much tighter budget. We didn't have the mailers, for example. But the one benefit we had last year was that we ran it for like, I think, a month and a half as opposed to just 3 weeks for this one. But still, this year we got more responses, so that's good. We're happy with it.
Good. Joe, I see your hand up.
Yeah, in a marketing sense, this would be considered a good statistical sample size, but without knowing the background of the individual people that respond and whether we're dealing with smaller subgroups of high responding groups, there's no way for us to really know how significant the sample size is. I would, however, say that this is a good turnout. I think Tim framed it very well in the fact that this is a really good turnout for information for us. But I would also caution us to say everything becomes a relative issue to the overall scope of this. So I think this is really good. I think it's significant, but I would also caution us that it could be a bunch of subgroups of very intact people that tend to speak up a lot in town, and that we didn't necessarily hear from some other groups that may not have represented themselves as well.
Yeah, and Joe, to that point, I think one thing as I was going through the raw data, there was a very heavy there were a lot of surveys that got logged through the senior center, which was great, right? Because that was our way for if folks weren't able to access computers. There were a lot of surveys that only listed the senior center and didn't rate anything else that came from the senior center. So I think that, to your point, right, which isn't bad, right? Like that's a perfectly, in the end, it's whoever gets their vote out, right? But I think we do see those sort of subgroups within the data without even doing too much of a deep dive. So I think that's a valid point. Tony, I see your hand.
Yes. So just again, kind of exploring the 674 number. So, I mean, certainly it felt like ARPA was well marketed. This ARPA survey was well marketed in town. And I wonder if it was more thoroughly marketed than other town surveys have been. Does anyone have a sense for that?
Yes, it definitely was. At least from the in comparison with the citizen survey we did last year, this ARPA survey was much more well marketed, especially given that we sent out this flyer to each and every household in town, which I think was a wonderful help.
John, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the EDC a while back, we did a survey and we did the mailer as well. And I think we got like 465 responses and we were pretty happy with that. So I think this is a pretty good response for us. And I think you guys did a good job. So thank you, Ann and Matt and Probst family.
Yeah, and I think Anne had a huge part in the marketing that went around this. So I think we have really quiet golf clap for Anne and all of her.
It was a group effort, believe me. Matt did a lot, and everybody went around and contributed. I do have a question on blanks. When you're referring, Brian, to blanks, is a blank just on one question, or is the whole survey blank? Were there many, like you said, Andrea mentioned the senior center, where there was only one vote on the whole survey and it was for the senior center. Were there other issues where other candidates people just checked off the one thing and that was it?
Yeah, let me kind of elaborate on that. So if I scroll back, when I initially referred to a blank here, like an all blank survey would be someone who got through question 1 asking if you lived in the town and then failed to rank any of the choices, basically leaving all of the ranks blank. So that would be like an all blank ballot, and those were not counted, obviously, because there's nothing to count. So that was about 15%. So it wasn't a ton, but not zero either. Next, you could have say someone who left 1 or 2 up to 17 or 16 really blank, and that would be a valid ballot. So say you ranked 2 of the things and you left the other 15 blank, that would be perfectly valid. We would just count, candidate A as your first choice and candidate B as your second choice, depending on how you rank them. I don't have any plots put together as far as kind of distribution of blanks, but I did definitely notice you guys brought up the senior center expansion. So that was one of the ones I did note where there were a lot of, say, that was their primary choice. Like you see on this plot here, there was a nice solid count, about 85 to 90 of people who chose that as their primary choice. And then a lot of the other options on that ballot were blank. So maybe it was only the senior center that appeared there, but that sort of behavior appeared elsewhere. I think, there was some kind of, it's hard to say survey fatigue for a 1-question survey, but what you could do is potentially go and rate like your top 5 choices. And then I suppose if you got bored, you could not do the rest and hit submit, and leaving, say 12 blank or whatever the number might be. So you could have some blanks on the ballot there as well. So I noted that some of these ones that weren't quite as popular, maybe, like if we take a look at count of votes per candidate, this is really a good way to look at that. So like property tax relief had like 475-ish of total people who voted on it, whereas, just picking arbitrarily here at random, upgrades to municipal tracking of septic was say like 375. So more people were inclined to say leave that unranked or blank, but it really kind of varied by candidate. So it's difficult to say there was any pattern to it.
Thank you. I wasn't saying, I want to make it clear, I wasn't saying that somebody stuffed the ballot box or anything. We
No.
specifically said at the top that you could choose which ones you wanted to select.
Yeah,
And you could
exactly.
leave
So
them blank.
I think that was a good strategy as far as survey design, because what you would have seen is more all blank ballots. If you sort of force people to rank everything, they would be more likely to just give up and close the tab. So I think that was definitely a good choice. And yeah, like we said, the data is the data. So how people chose to vote is how they chose to vote.
I think we could see that here on the left. The improved trail systems was the one that had the most, I guess, blanks or not. People didn't vote for it, and part of that we can attribute to, of course, people just not prioritizing it. But I think we definitely know, we can say that there's a certain percentage, certain number of submissions that occurred before that was even an option.
Yes, there were about 165 surveys that went in prior to that one. So even if you assume 100 of those, I think I popped into the chat sort of the cutoff point when the new ones went in. Again, like I know, Brian, this is your sort of volunteer time, but depending on how easy it is to kind of rerun this, I think it would be really nice to have kind of the before and after adjustment so we can see if there's any, sort of significant movement on any of the trends.
Yeah,
after
if
we
I could
make the
ask a
changes.
question on that, I mean, without manipulating the data, what would be your thoughts on how to do that? Would you want to see just like this same algorithm run only with data starting at the point where that ballot option was added?
Yeah, I just
Okay.
cut the top, and then again, then you have both of them, so then you're not losing anybody's information. You just see the impact of the difference, right? So if all the trends are the same, then all the trends are the same. But if there's something that significantly changes, that's something we can weigh.
Okay. Yeah, that would be pretty simple for me to do. I won't be able to do it right now while I'm presenting here, but I could probably do that and just add 1 or 2 more slides with that. And when I share the slides out, I'll include that information.
Yeah, I think that would be super helpful.
Brian, would it be possible to do one other splice too, which would be to pull out all single answer respondents? And and then have one where you have all the single answer respondents pulled out, and then see, because the single answer respondents are obviously focused on one issue. Whereas if we're looking to rank a hierarchy of things, we would probably get a better sample size of how people were ranking their decision by using the people that actually ranked.
Yeah, that's definitely something I can do.
If it's a difficult thing, I understand, then that's not a problem. I don't know how you're dicing it. So, but that would be interesting to know.
Okay. Yeah, not too difficult. I was just trying to think about in the background. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head of like what the proportion of people who chose one option versus proportion of people who chose. Actually, I guess I do have that here in the data.
There are thousands of different ways to splice it. I know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what I was trying to, this doesn't sound too bad, but as I was kind of going through the data myself, what I was trying to steer away from was like my own behavior that would help bias or manipulate the data per se. So, but I know this is more as like,
If it makes you feel better, it's unavoidable. I mean,
Yeah.
people do this for a living and they splice this data however they want it to read. So
Yeah.
I applaud you for trying not to, but you have to do a splice.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I don't think any one way of looking at it necessarily then weighs higher or lower on how we think about it. It just gives some different ways to kind of consider who's voting for what, why.
Okay.
Could we
I
just
see
confirm?
Dan, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Could we just confirm that when the survey was presented, it rotated for each respondent, that they didn't get
Confirmed.
the same question first?
Confirmed.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's true.
Yeah, the choices, the options were randomized for each and every respondent.
Could you please show the list one more time?
Like the top list of things.
Yes.
The option,
Okay.
one more note on that, and the options were randomized even for the senior center when they manually entered it. I feel bad for them because they print off a physical copy that's in a certain order, and when they have to go manually enter it in, unfortunately the survey just would randomize the order, so they have to manually. So we're grateful for the senior center for their work in helping with the accessibility of the survey, and it wasn't necessarily easy for them.
Okay. So if we do this, so again, we're just looking here. So the majority rules one, we have property tax, senior center, and sidewalks. And so this is just if we consider who ranked number one, right? The 1.7 acre lot, youth and family services, town bonus pay. And then if we look at it by the ranked choice,
Yep.
it ends up being the same things, right? And the top youth and family services falls out, and the senior center and the sidewalks split.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
pretty
it's more or less
similar,
the same.
but-
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, just agreeing with you. Yeah, your interpretation's correct.
Yep. And as I recall, kind of looking at the numbers, the property tax is sort of the number one by a fair bit, right? Like that one kind
Yeah,
of
so
falls
I have
out by, yeah.
vote
Okay,
counts,
yeah.
but it's
Yep.
definitely pretty substantially in the lead. So I guess people would like to see their taxes go down, but
Yeah, but that's good. And I mean, in that, we also have a separate sort of economic relief one in there too, but that one doesn't seem to get nearly as much traction, which was kind of interesting. At least for me, it was interesting to see. Okay, so we are at 8:10. Does anyone have any additional questions for Brian? Anything else? We've got sort of two asks on a couple on different ways to splice it. One is removing sort of the single vote, and then doing the cutoff on the 3/17 date. Joe, I see your hand.
Well, I had one more question, and I don't think that we want to do this, but as the marketing guy in me says, it would be very interesting if we could match some demographics with the individual people to see if there are any common themes. And I don't know if that's even anybody's willing to do that, or if we want to do that, but that's what the guy, the little marketing guy in me, that's what it says.
Collect any demographic data for this brief survey. Maybe Matt, if you want to.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. We had hoped to, in this survey, we'd hoped to upgrade our SurveyMonkey account to one that allows for dynamic logic So we actually would have combined both surveys into the same survey tool as the annual town satisfaction survey, which does include demographics information. Unfortunately, the town didn't have budget to do that this year. We will have it upgraded for next year, but of course that doesn't help us right now. With that being said, we do have there is a possibility of correlating responses. But I would defer to Brian as to the difficulty of doing this based on IP address and submission time. I think if it's the same IP address and similar submission window time, we can basically correlate a given response to the annual satisfaction survey, which does have the demographics, to their response to the ARPA survey. Granted, of course, the satisfaction survey, we only have 510 responses, so it will be a subset of those. But we had hoped and we had promoted both surveys at the same time, meaning, after you complete the ARPA survey, we inserted a link right at the very end to say, hey, thank you for your response. Click here to go on to the satisfaction survey. So I think there is a possibility correlation, but I would defer to Brian as to the difficulty of doing so.
Well, Matt, before we put you guys through and doing any of that work, I would like the rest of the committee to at least weigh in as to whether they actually want to know that or think it's important. Because like I said, I'm willing to take the results as they are and say, okay, this is what it is, without all that. But if we want to understand, for instance, people saying sidewalks in certain parts of town, or if we want to understand, certain populations that are voting for certain things, we would have a better understanding and insight into who and why, which might be important, but that may not be really important to the process that we're going to do. And so I would let everybody else weigh in on that for a minute before we put anybody through the effort.
So I think for me, it depends on kind of how much effort and how much time. I think it would be valuable if we had it, because I think one of the things we've tried to do in this committee is try to find ways to serve as much of the town as possible, right? And so if we're find that what we're doing is ending up with a grouping of proposals we're recommending that only kind of serve one part of town, I'm not sure we'll have kind of satisfied that. But I'm also okay to take the results as they are if that's an enormous lift. Anne?
It seems to me that we have some pretty clear responses looking at it both ways, the ranked choice and the majority choice. And while I think it's interesting to find where people are in town that are voting, if it's a lot of extra work, I don't know if it's worth it. I mean, if it may happen, demographic information was collected in the town survey that might give us the satisfaction survey, that might give us a general sense of the people that were responding, although not on each of our questions, but just a general sense of that. If it's a lot of work, I wouldn't make the request.
Yeah,
Tony?
as part
ahead,
as part of the analysis that I know Brian's going to be spending a few weeks on, Brian and Mary, and thanks again for all their work. I'm sure they will be doing, as they did last year, just a summary results of the demographics of people who filled out the survey. And the demographics we collected are whether they own or rent a home, what type of home they rent, is it a single family house, duplex, apartment, whether they have children in schools and what type of schools, public, private or charter, the schools their kids go to, their race slash ethnicity, their income, their age, and their gender. We don't have any sort of location within town, so in terms of the sidewalks, we wouldn't be able to correlate that. So I know Brian will be doing sort of summary statistics of who filled out the survey. But yeah, I'll defer to him as to how difficult it would be to correlate between surveys if we needed to do so.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I definitely might be some difficulty. I know for me, it was a data point of 1 as far as the 2 surveys, but I did not fill them out at the same time. Like I did them on different days. So that's a big assumption to make, that people sort of fill them out at the same time. IP address, I guess, would be a better sort of primary key between the two. But like you said, we don't have equal responses, so we have a decent amount more here than we had on the satisfaction survey. So there would be a good chunk missing. And yeah, I mean, I guess I would also just ask is, would it change anything? So if you had some interesting demographic information, would you actually kind of ignore the outcome that you have from either the count or the ranked choice, and sort of shift how the I don't want to say I guess shift how you would distribute the money between the top choices based on that. So
Brian, are
then,
you asking which demographic we like the best? Is that what you're asking?
I mean, again, I kind of was yeah. So like,
Yeah, yeah.
without getting into like biasing the results.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I sort of fail to see like how the demographic information would be useful here as far as like determining a top choice versus, just providing some interesting information. When it comes to the satisfaction survey, I can see it a little bit more. And kind of as far as like my time, I would say it's what you suggested, I think is certainly possible. Like we would have some missing data, like I said, but I also want to be able to spend my time on the data I have now for the satisfaction survey as well. So I sort of have to balance here how much I want to go back and say work on this versus kind of shift forward and work on the satisfaction survey. But I'll leave it up to you. I mean, I'll definitely do the 2 asks as far as running with the new date to see the outcome with the additional added candidate, as well as the single answer respondents pulled out. But I think it might be a little bit of a time sink to kind of dive down the rabbit hole of the demographic linking to the survey without a clear like outcome as far as what it would be used for.
Tony, you had your hand up. You put it down. Are
Yeah,
you?
in the interest of time, I will withhold my comment. So
Okay.
I'll just let us move along. Thank you.
Okay, John.
I just want to say I agree with Brian. It's really the demographics is a nice to have, but it's not a need to me. I think having the scale down, the how many people just once you pull up the single answers, thing like that would be better than the demographics. I think that's a lot of time, and it really probably wouldn't change my opinion on the rankings. So I just want to state that.
Mimi.
Yeah, I agree with John. I think we have plenty of information. And that was an interesting point, Andrea, on, the locations in town. But if we're not going to get that information, it seems like a lot of work. And I think we have great information here. And thank you very much to Matt and Brian.
Okay, so it sounds like we're gonna stick with what we got here with the 2 additional asks for just sort of ways to splice it. And then we'll move forwards. Good. Anything else for Brian or Matt before we move to the next item?
Thank you, guys.
All right,
Appreciate
awesome.
Thank you. Great job.
Yeah, I
Thank
will
you.
echo everyone on saying thank you. And I'm going to put you guys back over into the audience. Okay, Brian, you should be going back to the attendees. Okay, great. So next item is proposal discussion. So going through the questions that we had identified last week. Pull up the tracker that has the questions and we'll just zip through. Share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Good.
All right.
Very small
Okay.
font.
Very small font. Let me zoom in.
I'm glad
Okay.
you said that.
I'm looking at it on a big monitor, so it doesn't look as small to me. Okay. Tax abatement, we didn't have questions for, so let's table that. These two, so we started with the senior center renovations. We didn't, we had tabled that one last week, so I am going to leave it for the end if we have any additional questions we want to put there. So let's jump to the premium pay. So I reached out to the consultant. I sent some information around. So there is currently, it doesn't look like a premium pay initiative, or there is a small one, but it requires very, very, it only addresses very low income folks. I'm just trying to pull it up. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere. So perhaps, so really what it is there's nothing in the pipeline from the state. Southborough has not provided any premium pay. I got some additional eligibility criteria from the consultant, and it actually limits a fair bit who can get it. So I think the biggest thing is that it only applies to exempt employees. So I think the big bucket we have been talking about, for example, was teachers. So teachers are non-exempt, or no, sorry, it only applies to non-exempt employees. Teachers are exempt, right? So that bucket falls away. And so I got the list of all employees who would be eligible, and it ends up being a total of 64 people in town on our payroll. Of those, 46 are the police department and fire department, which we currently have a request in for. And then there's an additional 18 that come from different departments who were in office through the pandemic. So what that looks like in terms of numbers is the request from the police department and fire department would be $230,000 if we did it at the $5,000 premium pay that was asked for. It's an additional 90 to do everyone in town, so it goes to 320,000. Joe, I see your hand up. Oh, you're muted, Joe.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that. I reached out to Gregory Martineau, and he did not anticipate a proposal coming in from himself for schools or from any entity that he knew of for schools. I just wanted to let the committee know that.
Yeah, and Mark also followed up with the school district to see if there's anyone who would even be eligible, and it sounds like the answer is no, because anyone who would fall into that non-exempt bucket was working from home during that time. So I'll just throw the numbers in here and then maybe move on. But I don't know if anyone disagrees with this, but I think for me, I find it, I think it would be hard. Oh, sorry, Tim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so this is going into what you were about to say. Do we have information outside of police and fire? Do we have information about the other eligible employees and whether or not they actually did work overtime and were impacted from that perspective during COVID? Or is this just a catch-all?
So this is everyone additional who would be who would have been eligible, right? So we have, and so when we're looking in the police department and the fire department, it's everyone on that payroll, right? Just to start with. So it's police officers, it's communication officers, right? It's sort of the whole gambit of folks, right? So just right. So when we're thinking about who we consider in that. So when we look at the remaining, so I have an electrician and maintenance technicians. So folks who are in buildings, I think, doing work, all the DPW staff, water department staff, cemetery, a little bit of business administration. Yeah, that's the stretch.
Can you
I can-
scroll to the left, please?
Yep.
Let's go, premium pay for public safety employees. Okay.
Yep.
So I thought that this was a bonus mainly for police and fire for the extra work they did on behalf of the town during COVID. And when I think eligible, the first thing I think of is, were these folk working overtime? And we all know the police and fire were.
But they would have been paid for overtime. Let's be clear on that, right? This is not overtime pay, and it only applies to folks who would have been eligible for overtime. So everyone would have been paid for their overtime. This is in addition to that. This is effectively bonus pay on top of what you would receive for overtime for specifically being public facing during the pandemic.
Then I'm struggling with it a little bit, to be honest with you. If people have been fairly compensated for the work that they've put in, this seems to be just a catch-all bonus, almost like an extra Christmas bonus.
Correct. That's effectively right. It's an additional bonus, and it is permitted under the ARPA funds specifically for folks who are
So
public
then,
facing during the
yeah.
pandemic. That's
So then-
that's what it is. Yes.
So then my challenge to the group, and I'll go with what the group wants, but my challenge to the group is how do we recommend this, knowing that they've already been compensated for the work they've done? How do we go with this over providing needs-based funding to something like the Commission of Public Trust?
So I've got, I'll go to Mimi.
I just have a question.
Yep.
In answer to your question, Tim, I don't know. And it may not have to be an either or. Maybe we can do both, but we'll see how things shake out. My question is the fire department, when they put in their request, they had full and part-time, and they had 5,000 for full-time, 1,000 for part-time. Or the police department, are they all full-time? And did the DPW work, were they at the DPW facility throughout the whole pandemic, or were they home for some time?
So I don't have the split part-time versus full-time. That's a good question. I can reach back out about that. And I guess what Mark or whoever pulled this together did was they basically put the payroll against the eligibility criteria. So to be eligible for this, you would have had to be in person.
Okay.
And so the list here is folks who were in person.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
And to be clear, I only have requests right now from police department and fire department. So those are the only people who have formally asked. The additional 18 headcount, or what it would mean to do this for all of town versus the two groups that asked. That's the difference. And we don't have to include that, right? It's just to have all the data. John.
So I just wanted to respond to Tim, how you can look at this a different way. This isn't a bonus pay. They were paid for what they were working. This is hazard pay. The first 6 months of the pandemic, nobody knew what was going on. One person got sick, a whole bunch of people could get sick. I was a paramedic, full disclosure, and they were taking anybody that was retired for the last 10 years and putting them back, they were reinstating their license and let them go back on a truck. Someone I know went back for a week, very cautious, did everything he was supposed to do, wound up getting COVID, intubated for 3 weeks and in rehab for 6 weeks. So this is a hazard. To me, this is a hazard pay. It's not a bonus pay. It's not that. These people would have to be interacting with people that have to be out and about when everybody else was, working from home where it was kind of safe. So I personally, I just want to look at it as that, as not as a Christmas bonus. These guys are out there, these guys and girls and women and men were out there risking their lives because nobody the first 6 months, no one knew what was going on. It was a big mystery every day. these people were coming home, they were going through masks, they were getting their faces all worn out from wearing their masks, constantly being out there and exposed to the sick and injured, not knowing you're getting into. So that's how I look at it. And anybody else, you can look at it how you want.
Hey, John, I don't disagree with you. But then you turn it around. I mean, every single hour that police and fire work is hazard. I mean, every day is a hazardous day for them.
I
Right.
agree, but this is even more of a hazard.
I think there are people who will agree with you and people who disagree with you.
Okay. Yeah, I get where you're coming from.
So-
I'm not arguing. I'm just saying that's how I look at it instead of like a bigger bonus paid holiday type thing.
So Tony, I see your hand, and then I think I'm just going to suggest, right? So
Yep. so
again,
let
this is
me-
just information
yeah,
to
so let
have.
me-
I don't think we need an answer on whether or not we think we want to move forwards with this at this point, just to sort of understand what the numbers look like. Tony, go ahead.
Yes, so I was just going to make what I think is just a process point about the discussion we're having right now. I think we're in a phase now where we're trying to clarify our understanding of these various proposals. And we're not having the value discussion of which one's more important at this time. So at least that's how I think about it. I think right now we're just trying to make sure we have all the information we think we ought to have the more complicated discussion at a later date.
So I'm going to add a follow-up question here to subdivide out by part-time and full-time, because that's a good point. When I was running my numbers, I was just assuming the 5,000 for everyone. So the number actually probably comes down from that. So I think that's a follow-up that I can do on this piece, just to have all the numbers together. Okay.
I think the fire department included that.
I think they did, and their number that came to the full 125 for them. Yeah. I just did a blunt. I had the 64 and I multiplied it by the 5. So yeah, the number will be a little bit lower than that. Okay, I can get that and recalculate. Anything else or on the premium pay piece, or can we move on to the next? Moving on. Okay. So this is all premium pay, youth and family.
Yes.
Joe, that's you. Yep, go ahead.
Yep. I had a great conversation there as well. To address a couple of the points. The reason why there's such a disparity in the part-time personnel is because this really is dealing with the fallout of COVID and the exposure of their office to additional need from the population. And so she's not entirely sure, how many hours she would need the person to work moving forward, because she doesn't know if the pace is going to continue, if it's going to, how fast it's going to ebb off, if it ebbs off. So I would look at this as an experimental bridge for them in terms of funding an additional person up front that helps to create time for the full-time personnel to really address a lot of the issues going forward. And in terms of also dealing with the grant for interface, it's sort of the same thing. Their office used to do some of this referral work, and the interface has freed up their people to do it. As far as the billing on interface goes, what I was told is they pay a flat rate based upon the previous year's usage, up to a maximum of $25,000. And so at that point, so when we were looking at the numbers per referral, there is a number in there, and that's how they calculate it from the previous year to the next year. But the cap is at $25,000. So when you were doing the brief math and I was doing brief math, that was actually a correct way of doing it. But as in the conversation with her, both of these measures are measures to free up their full-time personnel to really be working with the people and working with the community that they're supposed to be doing. So this is both of these really are in the wheelhouse of the ARPA directive. And I asked her to try and resubmit a more firm number based upon what she really expected or really could use, knowing that if especially with the part-time personnel, if the money isn't used, it would revert back to the select board for them to reallocate and do something else with it. So, but look at it as a 2-year time horizon for it.
So am I catching this right, Joe? So I've got the flat rate is paid based on the previous year up to 25K. Interface is freed up personnel to do more direct work with the public and serve new COVID needs. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And she doesn't know exactly whether this is going to be a more permanent status for them moving forward out of COVID, but she's anticipating that there'll be a trail off in the need for some of these services over the next 2 years. She just doesn't know what the pace is going to be, given that we're coming out, and that a lot of the things are going to be more than 1 or 2 years, especially with, the youth needing services moving forward. So I think it's a healthy way for us to look at it.
This one, the 2025, sorry, did you say this was there was the added complication where there may have been 6 months from the school?
She said, yes, the schools were interested in also helping out with the funding we're at the moment they were expressing that they were willing to help fund for 6 months. That had not actually been allotted, I don't believe.
Okay.
But that was the implication, because I think there were 2 ways of billing it, whether they billed it on the calendar year or the financial year or something of that nature. And so the school would fill out basically a 6-month period to bring them to the full cycle, the full calendar cycle or some such.
So it's a possible alternative funding source, but it's not fully secured yet. It's kind of where it's at.
No, it's a possible temporary funding source, more to bring it in line with the standard way that it's billed.
Okay.
Not necessarily that, hey, we're going to throw in for 6 months. It really was a bridge to get them through a time period. So when asking for 25,000, that's really looking for a full year of funding, because but the way it's been billed in the past is we've been underbilled actually for the service by maybe a couple $1,000s each year the last 2 years. So she anticipates that we might have to pay the full rate of the services that we've been getting provided moving forward, given the need that's been current.
So the ask to us is still 25,000. Is that sort of what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Are there any follow-up questions we need, or does that clarify the youth and family services piece? Good. Okay. MTC, Tony, you had a couple here. Dive in however you want to dive in.
So
Can
I've
you
reached
scroll
out
to
to
the left,
the,
please?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Tony.
so I've reached out to the contact you gave me in the town, Andrea, and have not yet heard back. So I'll follow up with her again tomorrow.
Okay. All right. So this is on. This is waiting. Okay. Next one, DPW. So
Are you
Karen,
skipping the Board of Health?
did I miss them? I think they're further down, unless maybe I jumped. Let's see.
I don't know. I saw Board of Health in column H.
They're further down.
Okay.
I think
Sorry.
it was, this is H is who has submitted support for some of these other proposals.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yep, no, you're good. All right, DPW, so this is sidewalks. Karen can join our meeting next week. She did ask if we can, if there's any clarity we can provide on what we would like more detail on. So the 2 things that I had given her were sort of where we're thinking new sidewalk installation would happen, and if that's not known yet, kind of what would be the criteria for it, and then also potentially discussing if there were additional funds, what could we do with that? Is there anything else that that folks feel that she should come prepared to talk about that I can prep her on? Joe?
Some sort of idea of how much of a figure we need to do X number of feet, so that we can understand, how far our dollars go in terms of spreading sidewalk, and also in terms of the cost per area, because it may be different to do a causeway than it is to do a residential neighborhood. So that would be something useful to know in our deliberations of money.
So you mean, so area, you don't mean like dimensional area, you mean sort of like type, location type or something like that? Is that,
location,
or?
yeah, sort of an idea of location type and cost per, 100-foot space or a half a mile, or so we understand a useful amount of money to do a project, not just throwing money over there saying, oh well, here's
Yeah, so
$100,000.
you're looking for a linear foot
Yeah, I'm sort of looking for, you know, for or cost per individual project that she can give us. That'd be nice.
Tony?
Yeah, so we've kind of touched on this a few times, and so just my opinion, in fact, the way I think about this, we would just allocate a chunk of money to DPW and say, build more sidewalks. It doesn't, in my opinion, matter which sidewalks, or if it's next to a road or next to a causeway, we would just be allocating more sidewalks. I guess I don't think of us choosing, do a sidewalks over there and do a sidewalk over there. I don't picture us doing that. I picture us picking a number. If the committee wants to do it otherwise, that's fine. But I just picture picking a number and say, build more sidewalks.
Mimi? Mimi there?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just, so Karen did give me the ballpark price for sidewalks, so I was just trying to look that up.
Oh, do you
So
have it?
Yeah, so it's $175 a square yard, or 25 a square foot, and that's concrete with granite curbing.
What is that in linear feet or linear yards? Because that's actually what we care about if we're thinking about mileage, right? What's a sidewalk? 3 feet, 4 feet?
Well, and she basically, I mean, you can look at it as 175 a yard of sidewalk. I mean, you need at least 3 feet, but
Oh, good point. Right.
so
Thanks.
so that's a basic.
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay.
And I'd like to know if she has like a plan, sidewalk plan, like if she has money, she's going to do this or that. So the money doesn't sit in, the general fund for years and years.
So just for reference, this is about $308,000 per mile, if that's sort of helpful for framework. Tim?
It's a really interesting comment, because it usually does just go into a fund and it just sits for years and accumulates until they're ready to do something. And I mean, you're probably all aware that there's a citizen petition on our next town meeting warrant to force DPW to provide a report to advisory on their road plan, which of course town meeting can't do, but that's a different issue. So yeah, you have a very interesting point there, but I don't know that we're going to get what we want.
I'd also say, so the proposal is for sidewalk repairs and new sidewalks. And I think when people vote for sidewalks, in my sense, and there's been a lot of chatter on like the parents' Facebook page lately too about people wanting sidewalks. I don't think people are thinking about fixing sidewalks. I think they are thinking about new sidewalks, right? And if we allocated $1 million and there were no new sidewalks because it all went into sidewalk repair, I don't think people would consider that a success. As I do think there is some amount of detail that is important, because I think what defines sort of the money being used in a way that citizens find successful kind of depends on what it goes into and how much of that is actually new sidewalk in town.
Yeah, that's always absolutely correct. Unfortunately, town meeting gets a description of what the budget's going to be used for, and we approve it, and then the department can appropriate that money. But once they have the money, they can use it for whatever they want, regardless of what they told us at town meeting. And that's just the way the law works. Then there's nothing we can do about it.
Is it certainly at least worth asking what the plan would be?
It's always worth asking.
Again, I'm trying to figure out how to, like, this is something people so clearly want, and I'm also cognizant of like the pocket park, right? And how that's playing out in town right now. And just
I think
how do we?
I think this is all interesting, but I think Tony's point right now for our deliberations sort of carries the day, because we can't, the select board with the DPW are going to make all those decisions, and all we can do is try and advise and tag a number. And I think he is, although I want to know all the rest of it and would love to do it, I think at this point in the conversation, he pretty much is right, and we should probably worry about that later.
Yeah, and we can definitely move on from this. There are projects I would not give money if all I was going to go to is repairs. Like that's, or maybe I would, but that would make me think very, very differently about this. And I think we're about to consider giving a really substantial portion of this budget to this. But for now, I think this is sufficient and we can move on, and I will ask the question. Tony.
Okay, so not to belabor that topic, but maybe we could ask a clarifying question. I don't know if we can do this. So how can we guarantee that the money would actually be spent in a timely fashion on sidewalks? I don't know if we could ask that question, but
You can. A lot of sidewalk work in the town usually goes hand in hand with roads. If we were going to do a lot of specific money, that might up the importance of doing road projects as well. So there could be a whole lot that goes along with it.
Okay, if the sense of this committee was that, well, if we allocated $500,000 to sidewalks, but in fact, we don't know that it's going to ever be spent, then we might recommend as a committee to spend the money elsewhere.
Right, which is why I asked if she has a plan. I'd feel better if she said, if I had 300,000, this is what I'd do.
So I'm not experienced in town government enough to know how you get the town to actually commit to doing something if they're given money. I don't know. Tim, you seem to have expertise here. And any suggestions?
No, because, sorry, because I mean, the money does sit. I mean, Karen, like we usually, like for roads or what have you, we put 400K every year into a fund, and it just sits there until it reaches a certain threshold. It's usually somewhere between, I don't know, 1 to 2 million, at which point, yeah, and then at that point, it goes out to bid and a whole bunch of work gets done. That can take 3 years, 4 years. By that time, you can have an entirely new select board, and the people who promised that it would be done, they're gone, and you have a new board and you have new priorities. So, and that's just the way it works.
Yeah, there's a efficiency of purchasing in that area at $1 million or over. So as Tim says, she as what's been told to us, is that she waits until she gets $1 million or so, and then goes out and does projects because she can get more for her money when she gets up into that echelon.
And that makes sense, but it does make me a little. That's unfortunate.
Right? We could ask about the spending cycle, because if the spending cycle is coming to $1 million this year or next year, then whatever we put in there is probably more likely to get used, because she'll just put it into furthering projects in other places.
I'm trying to think of, so that's an excellent point, Joe. I'm trying to think of a clarifying question we could pose here that might give us more confidence that if we spent money on sidewalks, it would actually get spent in the next year. So maybe if there's a cycle to this, I suppose we could ask, so how much more money are you trying to accrue before you'll actually go build some more sidewalks?
Well, it has to be spent if it comes out of here by 2026.
But I think that, right, so, I mean, if we're talking about, and again, I'm cognizant of the time, I won't belabor this too much longer, but like, right, if what we need is $1 million to have a meaningful project, and we don't have $1 million, then maybe what is actually being asked for is $1 million, not, like, I would rather dedicate $1 million and know it was going to be sidewalks than give $400,000 and not know it was going to be sidewalks, you know? So like,
maybe we could ask, I'm sorry to interrupt, but maybe we could ask, since she's coming in next week, right?
Yes.
What confidence should we have that if we allocate money to sidewalks, that it will actually be spent within the next year, or something like that?
I think that's an interesting question. It'd be one good to know. As we all know, this will come down to what the select board votes. So if we want to ensure this, we have to make sure the select board votes it through and ensures it. Is pretty much where we are.
Is this good? I can follow this up with her and kind of give the sort of the direction we're looking at, which is really, I think what it comes down to is just confidence, right? Like, how do we have a confident sidewalk project? That's what we want. Because that's what's being asked for here, not something else. All right. Are folks okay if we move on?
Mhm.
Okay. Clickers. Mimi, you sent an email around. Give us a summary.
Yeah, I have to find it. So Jim plans on going to town meeting with this in the fall, 2022. If it passes, he's going to lease clickers to use in the annual town meeting of 2023. And if it's a fabulous experience for all, then he will look to purchase them in that the lease payment will go towards the purchasing price. But the caveat to all of this is that the town moderator gets to choose how people votes, regardless of how, if town meeting votes for clickers and everything's great, the moderator can say, no, I want people raising their hands.
So is
So
the
this
money,
is-
the money is for the lease, or the money is,
No, so the money would be sometime after 2023 to buy the clickers, in which the lease payment would go towards it, I believe. But that may not happen if the moderator isn't in favor of clickers. And I didn't talk to Paul, so I don't know what his thoughts are on that.
so the 18.6, is that for the lease and the final purchase, or is there separate money for the lease? Do we know?
I believe the 18 is for the entire purchase. The actual lease part, I think, is more like about a third of that. Was what?
But
was
this money, so
That
I'm
was
just
what-
trying to figure out where the line is drawn kind of on this
That's
whole
what was
cycle.
run through what was proposed at Capital was that about a third of it would go towards leasing them, and with the option to buy, and then you'd spend the full 18 at purchase time.
Okay, so
Or
a third of,
well, you fill the remainder of it, so it'd be like 12
uh,
something to fill out the remainder of the purchase. And is that what you got had, Mimi? Is that what they said to you? Because that's what was said to us in Capital, I believe.
Going from memory, which I don't actually have, because I can't find the email. But that sounds about right.
there's about $6,000 that would be needed for the initial lease, and then you'd still, so there's an approval at town meeting, then you need $6,000 for the lease. Then if that's successful, you'd use need the remaining 12 to purchase.
Right, unless the moderator says he doesn't want people voting with clickers.
Tony?
Unfortunately, I listened to this capital discussion and I thought the answers were unclear. So if you actually want to know the specifics, I think you have to ask Jim.
Okay.
I did. That was his response.
So are we clear that this is all true? That the 6,000 would come from the ARPA money for the initial lease? Is that a follow-up we need to?
That's really up to the select board to decide. And, we're recommending, so.
Yeah,
for the
all right,
point of
but is the
discussion right
ask for
now,
us to
I would just
recommend-
move on.
Okay. ADA compliance. So this one I'm scratching my head on because I saw your response, and it sounds like it is just the 50. There's not an additional 50, even though in the proposal I think it asks for the full 100 across. I'm lost on this one. Anna, I don't know if you understood anymore.
My understanding was the town has to comply with ADA on a timeline with no deadline. We just have to fulfill it. And that there are no articles now on the warrant for ADA compliance. There's 50 from facilities and 20 from, recreation. They're separate but those are the only requests for money, for ADA compliance money.
But the
If
article
we
that
if we
was,
don't recommend it, the article has, according to John Parent, the 50,000 capital article has been pulled. And to the best of his knowledge, the only ADA funds being sought this year are the 50,000 that he is requesting and the 20,000 that Tim is requesting from ARPA.
so I thought that the 50 were pulled from the warrant article because the select board was going to allocate the first 50 out of ARPA. And then this request was an additional 50 on top of the 50 that they'd already put out. But it sounds like
not what he's
that's not
saying.
what he's saying, is it's just 50. And that's
That's-
already approved. This is like not even one for us anymore.
Right.
So I think this one doesn't merit any more conversation because it's already done. Okay. Anything else? Anyone thinks here? I think this one's done. Okay. John Lundblad.
Okay, I got an email from Tim today. They're hoping to have a design in the next coming weeks that they can send out to everybody. They're just waiting for the project manager to send that off that they hired. Parking for the field is traditionally at the Neary School as well as the tennis courts. They're not allowed to have organized events until after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so it won't affect with school parking. They say it's whether it will interfere with the future Neary plans. This is a town facility operated on our side of the house, is what he said. Will not be affected by potential new school build, other than seeing an increase of the use of the open space. Something that he had said in his email as well, I don't know if you guys saw it, that ADA and access, it wasn't on the list, but mentioned in the meeting. Part of the proposed plan is to more clearly define access and egress from the field, additionally to ensure ADA standards are met in and around the facility. So that's what I got from Tim.
So we have the ADA piece. I'm just gonna write that here.
And yes, the field will be fixed. That is part of the plan, to make it so it actually can see everybody from one side all the way across to the other.
No peak in the middle, that's the charm.
Remember that? You wouldn't see, you just see their heads and no ball. I love that.
We
was
didn't
awesome.
ask this, but is it worth asking, right? So this is, I know this started as just a like our fields are in desperate shape, right? Across the board, like our fields are junk in town. We need fields that are better. Is it worth asking what it would mean to break this out and separate this much larger, more significant project from just like, can the field just be fixed? Because I have hesitations about the bigger project here, but also have an understanding, like I've talked to a couple parents who are just like, oh my God, please just spend money on fixing fields. And this is the only fields thing we have.
This field's pretty bad. I mean, I think that that field, the only way you could do it is as a big project. Because, yeah, I mean, if you haven't been on it, there's really no easy way to get up to it. You kind of have to go up like a little deer trail. So.
But I'm just thinking the difference between like the dog park and the seating and the multi-use space and like the field when we don't have good fields for our kids to play on in town.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
Tony,
I-
I see your hand.
I think that we should deal with what was proposed to us personally. And so they proposed this project and we assess it as they proposed it. That's my opinion.
Okay, that's fair. Joe, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to let Tim go first. He's had his hand up for
Oh,
a while.
why don't I see you? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple things, one of which is, do we have any kind of guarantee? I know they do testing, I think every 2 years because it's a fill. Do we have a guarantee now that it's done settling and that it's not gonna do anything weird after we spend all this money?
That's a very good question.
Because I totally agree. I mean, my kids played soccer on it too. It's not a good field. It needs to be fixed. I agree. I'm in favor. And then my second question to them would be, why aren't you using CPA money? That's it.
Andrea,
No.
what I would add to some of your points are that you can ask recreation. There was a full field plan done a couple years back. Town meeting tore it apart.
I was there.
Then, oh, you were there for that?
I was. Yep.
Barely
Just
funded anything.
Yep.
And you know, the amount that we could sink into fields would be the entire ARPA money
Yeah.
easily. So
yeah.
I think
All right.
I'm
Yeah.
not disagreeing. Funding one field would be great, but as far as doing this particular project, I'm not sure I'd bother to break it up, because if you're going to do it, if Tim's right, and there's a problem with the field, we shouldn't do it. But there is no problem, it's probably a nominal cost to doing all of it versus doing part of it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Do you want me to reach out to Tim for that follow-up question, Andrea?
Yeah. So we had two. So do we know the field is done settling? And then why is this not CPA money? John, one more actually. Do we have a date for? I know that that in April is sort of the timeline that they have. I don't know if they've got a date at this point. Like, are we going to have this for before we put our final proposal together? I don't know if they've got like a hard date when they're expecting to have everything in hand.
I don't know if they have a hard date, just said the coming weeks. So I will follow up with that too. So I'm going to ask, we have done settling, can we use CPA funds, and does he have a date for us to have everything, hopefully before we make our recommendations?
All right, good. Forging on ADA no, this is the recreation ADA upgrades. Okay. So this one, is there a timeline on this one? And
I didn't talk to Tim, and he didn't respond to my email, but since John was talking to him, John Parent said that there's no deadline for any of the ADA compliance. It's just we're supposed to do it as quickly as possible.
okay. Any follow-ups needed there, Tim? Tim, did you have a comment?
No, I'm sorry. I just forgot to lower my hand from before.
Okay. All right. Board of Health. Oh, shoot. This was me. I'm sorry. I did not do this one. I apologize. I did my others. I didn't notice I had a third. I will follow up and send stuff up before next meeting.
I have a quick update.
I'm sorry about that. I got through my two and I thought, oh, great, I did mine. I totally missed out another one down here. Next one. John.
I have a quick update
Yeah. Oh, okay.
for Board of Health. So I believe that the select board, they've already voted to fund the director's salary from
Yes.
ARPA.
For the first year. There's
Right.
2 years, right?
Right. The other salary remained in the budget request. And last night advisory voted against it.
Okay. For the second year.
Yeah, just advisory has voted against the Board of Health's request for, I think it was a 28% increase to their budget for next year. Driven mainly by that significant increase in salary in the budget. And ironically, we haven't taken a vote on this yet, but some of the members were talking about sending a letter to the select board advising them to take everything out of ARPA, which is kind of sort of against what I think in general, because I don't like the salaries coming out of ARPA. In general, I think that they need to go to town meeting and be improved. However, the position that advisory took is that the state is strongly pushing communities to regionalize their boards of health. And It's something that's been discussed for 2 years and there's been no efforts made. And I believe advisory is taking a stand at this point, and saying that we should not be establishing a local Board of Health for this expanded scope for Southborough only, when the state is advising us to do it in a regional manner and is providing state money to do so. So that's the latest update I have for you from the advisory perspective.
So they are, okay, so let me just make sure I have this right. So voted against the second year funding for the director position and are potentially writing a letter requesting that the first year gets pulled from ARPA as well. So not like that basically that whole position goes away. That's the recommendation, or that's what the direction is heading.
So advisory hasn't sent a letter to the board, the select board yet. If they do, it would be to recommend that all of the new spend in the budget be pulled from ARPA instead of being put into the budget.
So we say pulled from ARPA, you mean taken from ARPA funding?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
not pulled from, okay. How much money is that?
I'd have to look back at the spreadsheet. Right, so I don't know what the select, I'm not certain what the next steps are. I don't know who's going to win at town meeting. I don't know what the select board's going to do. But it's possibly something new. The select board might ask us to look at, maybe. I just wanted to give you a heads up.
All right, okay. I will, okay. I will give Chelsea a call maybe in the next day or two and just try to get some more clarity on some of this.
Yeah, you could also give Kathy Cook a call.
Okay.
She's
Is she the person in Spirit Firm Advisory?
Yeah, she's in a unique position. She is the chair of advisory, and she'll be stepping onto a select board seat later this year.
Okay. Because she's running.
She's running unopposed.
Okay. Okay. Then the septic piece. Again, I apologize. I just missed that my name was on here again. Okay, last one. Not last one. National Grid property. John, can the town purchase without town meeting? National Grid.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I spoke with Lisa Braccio yesterday, and she's going to confirm with town council, but I'm pretty sure that purchasing property has to go through town meeting. They may be able to say, oh, we're going to purchase with ARPA funds, but I'm pretty sure it needs to go before a town meeting, but she's going to check. She said that the town has been in contact with National Grid, but that didn't elaborate on that. And she's going to get back to me about whether the board would make it tangible for it or any of that, to have more discussion.
Available. Lisa. I'll get back. Okay. So this is potentially not something that we, well, I mean, I guess you could use the funds, but you still needed the approval of town meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
Any additional questions anyone has? It sounds like we're still kind of waiting for some information back. Okay. Historic district. We had no questions. Economic support. We didn't have anyone following up here. I did get a response from Marianne, who spoke last week about what the trust fund can do. I'll share that out with everyone because it sounds pretty comprehensive, and I think it sounds like if we're looking for a spot for this money to kind of go, that makes sense. Audit support, this is done. The mini grants, do we have anything here? We did not. Feasibility. This is
That's me.
Shopsy. Okay, Shopsy. Yeah, John, go ahead.
We had our meeting on, I don't even know what date today is, but it was the 6th at Shopsy. So the feasibility study, I told them that there's a bunch of past studies that have been done, and was there any additional information that they were hoping to get out of this? And nobody had anything at that time. I told them if they come up with something to get back to me. The second question about funding to support homeowners, potential one-time needs-based abatement for taxes, prove hardships. We were asking if Shopsy's looking to administer the funds or not. No, they aren't. They were just hoping that somebody would be able to handle the administration of the funds for that. And we had asked if Shopsy had a recommendation who to administer it, and we had all said the Board of Commissioners of the Trust Fund, because that would be a perfect, because that's not just tax abatement, that's just general relief for anybody having a hardship. So they'd like to just see the funding go into that.
Okay. That's where the trust fund is. Yeah, that was somewhere. Okay.
And then the next one, I think that's the a feasibility study. Asking about the grant, I can't remember.
We also had if this could serve needs beyond the property tax assistance, so
Yes.
just more general assistance.
Yes, it could, because they handle any type of relief and assistance.
Okay. The last one here, feasibility for wastewater treatment. Is this already covered in a separate grant? The answer was yes. Is that right?
Yes and no. Yes, we have a separate grant. We have a grant for $45,000 right now to handle that, but I think it's going to take we think it's going to take a lot more than that grant money to do that. So we have another grant that we've applied for, the one stop, but we haven't heard back on that yet. So yes and no. It's covered by one grant. We have $45,000. And then I think out of that, we have $15,000 in kind money that we have to come up with, or 12,000, or might even be under $10,000 of in kind that needs to come out of that we're going to use, I think our coordinator for and such. So that study could probably use a bit more cash.
Okay. Any follow-ups there or additional questions for Shopsy? Oh, I also have this last one that has popped up, right? The consultant support, which I think is extension of a current headcount as well.
Yes.
So considering all the different Shopsy pieces, any additional follow-up that's needed there? Are folks comfortable with the information we have now?
So there's going to be I do know after our meeting. So the MAPC came out, a woman named Emma. We did a housing production plan a bit ago, and now we're doing an implementation plan. And what she was talking about ARPA funds, she was saying a lot of towns are asking to put like $500,000 into the affordable housing, because apparently the ARPA funds, the state was actually hoping like 20% would go towards affordable housing. So I do know that they will be putting in another request to see if we could add like up to $500,000 into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So that way, when property comes available, we could buy it because it would be in the trust already. Because right now we have CPC funds that we thought were getting released to us that have already been approved to us at town meeting. We thought we were going to get released recently, but something happened that they didn't like the way it was written or the request. So we did not get the funds. So we just lost, there was a piece of property that we could have put a duplex on, that Shopsy could have put a duplex on Parkerville, and we lost it because we didn't have the funds available because they were tied up in CPC. So CPC funds are available, but they haven't been released, even though they were approved at town meetings in years past to be released. So that I think is going to be on special town meeting. So that is why housing's going to ask that coming up. I mean, Shopsy's going to be asking that coming up.
Okay.
Hey,
Tim?
John, how much is in the Affordable Housing Trust right now?
If we had everything, like the money that's been approved to us, or in the actual there now?
In the
like
actual trust,
cash.
when I was on CPC, I know that several years, the money from that tranche was funneled into the trust, and I think there was like $1 million in there.
There should be now. We have only, it still hasn't been released to us. That's, if we got it all released, like the checks haven't been cut and pushed over to that Affordable Housing Trust from those days when it was approved. So once that they get released, we would have close to $1 million in there. Right now, I think we have a couple of 100,000, roughly.
Okay.
So it
That
wasn't
doesn't-
enough
that
to buy
doesn't-
the property.
That doesn't sound right to me. And
I know.
we're going back over 10 years where that fund was supposed to have, I know for a fact, it was supposed to have more than 800K in it already. And we had been talking about releasing more from the CPC accounts into the Affordable Housing Trust. And the reason why we didn't was because at the time Shop D didn't have a quorum to meet, so we didn't continue it.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit concerned about the
So
accounting.
can I just suggest we,
Sure.
if there's a question that we want John to go back with what is the current status of their funding, let's put that as a question and then
I'll get
keep it
that for
going.
you,
Does that make
Tim.
sense?
And I'll find out the dates, because I know it's on the minutes from the Shopsy meetings of, because Dorian, our chair, had a meeting with Andrew Mills, trying to get the funds, and it was supposed to be released, and then because we had an actual warrant article to get the money that was actually voted to go to Shopsy, I mean, to the Housing Trust. So anyway, we can touch base on that
Yeah.
offline.
I'm sure Freddie and Bonnie probably have a ton of information for you too.
I know that Dorian's been meeting with them, and I know that other town that this is a totally different subject of another time.
Let's,
that I'll get into
we're
with you.
9:18, so let's.
Yeah, that's right. Tim, we
okay,
can talk
yeah.
offline.
All right, let's leave this. There's a follow-up question here. Let's leave it there. Anything else anyone wants followed up with Shopsy? Okay, then let's do Joe Trails.
I'll do my best impression of the Micro Machines guy. As we talked about before, those two proposals for feasibility studies were combined into one because they all relate to the same corridor, and she can do one and then the other. On the proposal 4, I actually recommended she call the DPW because they may need equipment space, so they may actually need to add a shed to that proposal, but she was going to talk to the town and DPW to see if trails had space for the tools and other things that were allotted in the number 4 proposal.
For the enhancements?
Yes, instead of 12.5, it might be more because they might need to put a shed on town property so they have access to that equipment, because it was talked about in a prior meeting that I did remember, so I suggested it to her. On the big enchilada of the proposal number 1, there are a whole lot of there are a bunch of moving parts to this. One of which is a gate move, which is in conjunction with some already previously provided funding that will be coming from DPW and labor to create parking spots, which will actually create an ADA certified trail, which is the paved trail on part of the peninsula. So that'd be one of the only ADA compliant trails in the system in Southborough. So that's a good part of the project. The other big parts of that project are for a bridge and for a boardwalk. Both of those are necessary for the trail not to funnel out onto route 30 over there on that side of town, because right now that trail comes out. So the boardwalk and the bridge would allow the trail to not feed onto that road, which is a safety issue for hikers and walkers, especially at busy times of day. So that was sort of a safety issue.
So does the bridge go like all the way across the aqueduct? Is that what it does?
I don't know exactly where it goes across.
Okay.
But it
All right.
allows the trail system to avoid feeding out onto the road, which is
Okay.
why it's kind of a big deal. It's a 75-year life on that stuff. So this is a long-term investment in that trail system. They also are talking with Sanofi about getting some parking spaces in their parking lot, because Sanofi seemed motivated to have that trail really a working trail that their employees could use. So there's some moving parts with other partners that are coming in. that's the bulk of what I talked about with her. There was a whole lot of other things because she really gave me the full works. So if there are any other questions,
Use restrictions, that was the other question I see here.
oh yeah, no, it will not be able to use bikes on that, even on the ADA paved part, because that's MWRA, and MWRA is resisting allowing biking on there. Although she, it's at some point they could change their mind about it, but at the moment it's still no. But if in all the proposals that are there, this one is, if you want investment infrastructure in the trails, this one is definitely where the rubber hit the road.
Any additional questions or follow-up on trails needed? Let me ask more generally, because that gets us through all the different proposals that we have right now. Is there any, we've got some additional follow-up questions. I'll ask folks who had the bucket originally to just go back out. I'll send this around again like last time. Right now we have Karen coming next week to talk about the sidewalks. Is there any other proposal on here that we feel would benefit from asking someone to come to the meeting and talk through it? Is there anything that feels sort of big and convoluted in a way that would be beneficial? No, we're good. Just DPW. Okay. Good. Anything else here? Oh, senior center. This is we didn't really have time to talk about it last time. I think that there was a general sense that this is kind of already done and we don't have a lot of say in it. I do think we should still give it our due diligence to the extent that we are here to be a recommending body. So with that said, are there any follow-up questions we would like to ask of the senior center? I guess for me, it's a pretty comprehensive proposal. The only question that sort of has come up for me is, I know this one keeps getting kicked out, and it makes me feel like I'm missing something because I don't understand why it sort of got so much heat behind it now when it's one that has consistently avoided being funded through town meeting. And I don't know if we have an answer to that or if that's something that Mimi?
Well, I know it got punted because we were doing the public safety building and they were told then that, wait a couple of years and we'll get to you when that's done.
And it got punted before that because we were redoing Woodward. And it got punted before that because this is something that's been getting kicked down the road for 15 years that I know of.
And do we know why it didn't go into the warrant this year? I mean, again, maybe this isn't even worth a conversation having. There's been so much pressure sort of behind it, and it makes me feel like I'm sort of missing something when it's going through alternative channels, but has also been around for a really long time and is also not a warrant article. I don't know.
I don't know why it's not a warrant article. I have a strong feeling that it's going to be voted by the select board to be done.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have been asked repeatedly to why don't we just do this? Why don't we just pull it earlier? He's saying, just wait. It's a very short committee. Just let us do the process. Okay. The answer might just be because the assumption is that we're just going to do it with ARPA money. And so there's no point in doing it and putting in the article. Okay. Is there any other follow-up that we feel like needs to happen with the senior center, or are we content to leave it as is? Okay. Good. Anything else here? If not, we'll go through the rest of the agenda. We've got just a couple minutes left. Keep it moving. Okay. So, evaluation approach, I think we punt that. I think we're kind of doing that in parallel with everything else we're doing right now. Any strong feelings against that? Keep it moving. Okay. Next steps. So we've got the follow-up questions. I will again send that out so everyone can do the next round. We'll come back with it next week. Then hopefully that closes out all the open questions. And again, Karen will join us for next week to talk about the sidewalks proposal. Those are the only next steps I have on my radar. Is there anything else folks feel like needs to be followed up on? Once I have the slides from the survey, I'll send those around too. Good. Okay. Minutes. So I've got minutes from the 24th and the 31st for us to vote on. And I'm realizing as I say this that I didn't ask for a volunteer this week again. Do I have a volunteer to go back through and do the minutes for this one?
I'll do it.
Thanks, Tony.
If you finish,
Short
if
and
you wrap
brief.
up this if you wrap up this meeting in the next 3 minutes, how about that?
All right, done. Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to vote on the minutes from March 24th and March 31?
Motion to
moved.
approve.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Mimi?
Just on the 31st, Joe,
Yep.
spell check doesn't like my last name. It's Luttrell.
L-E, sorry, say it spelled. Yep.
Luttrell.
Okay, I will go through and change all the ones I got wrong.
And there's
Wasn't
a,
spell check, it's me.
and there's a reference to the registrar. Is that the town clerk?
Registrar, where is that?
That under the assignments of who's to follow up, I was to speak to the registrar.
Oh, that was about the clickers.
Yeah.
That was
Oh,
incorrect.
okay. I call him the town clerk. Is he a
Okay.
registrar?
Maybe.
I
I'll put in
think, I
clerk
think
for-
the town clerk in a town is also the registrar of voters.
I'll put in town clerk. I have no problem with that. Sure, no problem.
That's it. Thank you.
Anything else? All right. So let's do a roll call vote. Ms. Luttrell,
Yes.
Mr. Wood, John, you're
Unmute.
muted.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes,
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. Schoner,
Yes.
Ms. Rubenstein,
Yes.
and I will vote aye as well. Okay. Moving on, so that approves the minutes from March 24th, March 31. We need to review the 10th and the 17th next week. And Tony has graciously volunteered to provide very brief minutes from this week as well. Okay. Unfinished business. I don't think we have anything we need to come back on. Anyone disagree? Oh, okay. So let's go and open to public comment. I have 4 attendees. If you would like to comment, please raise your hand and I will allow you to speak. Okay, I see no hands. So next meeting. So next meeting still stays on the Thursday cadence. So that's our last Thursday meeting, 7:30. And then the week after we will switch to the Tuesday. So we've got a meeting next Thursday, and then the week after we move to the Tuesday meetings. All right. And that is all I have. Do I have a
Make
motion,
to adjourn.
Thanks, John. I have a second. All right. Well, there's a motion to adjourn. Let's go around. Ms. Luttrell,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
You notice I wasn't muted on that one. That was quick. And yes.
Mr. Palmer,
yes.
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. Schoner,
Yes.
Ms. Rubenstein,
Yes.
and I will vote yes as well. It is 9:30 and thus adjourns our meeting. Whew, on the dot. All right,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody. Have a great
We'll
night.
talk
Have a good
next
one.
week. Bye all.
Good night.
Take care.
Bye.